So we know you want to learn how to do transitions, but you just watched how to foil. You're not ready for transitions. We're going to talk a little bit about your mast position so that it's going to be safe to learn.
Amen. My name is Aaron and this is Eric. Welcome to our second video in the series of our Wing Foil School playlist.
So mast position, when you're flying, if you experience more pressure on your front foot, having to lean forward, you want to move the mast back. And if you have more pressure on your back foot, you want to move your forward. And this has been the conventional wisdom.
Yeah.
Because it's true.
Just basic leverage, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But for beginners, it's easy to interpret it as this is, oh, I'm going to start with the mast in the middle and I'm going to adjust it accordingly depending on what happens to me.
I've made that mistake. I think I've done that to where I've put it in the mid section and anticipating it. Anticipating
going off the back.
I haven't ever, knock on wood, maybe it's just the combination that I've used. I haven't had a challenge with that. However, I feel like, you know, when you throw the mast all the way in the back, then you're avoiding that and you're able to gradually come in to it as opposed to being halfway into the middle of it someplace and, you know, perhaps you are too far forward and you've got too much lift coming off your foil and you pitch it out in front of you. So I agree, Eric.
With the mast all the way in the back in the beginning, she's only going to fly if you really want it to. Not by accident while you're just trying to get your balance. You start pumping and you accidentally fly too soon.
Yeah.
As I mentioned in the previous video, from the back, every time you go out and you come back in, you only move it an inch forward.
Yeah, now an inch. That actually is a lot.
It is a lot.
Yep. 1 inch of movement can make a pretty big difference.
It does. And if it's a little bit more front foot pressure all of a sudden, then you move it back a ½ inch. But this is the best way. Does it take a little bit more time? Sure. But you eliminate some of the highest risk is just while you're learning, avoiding those violent takeoffs
and finding the sweet spot. And if you switch boards, I feel like you got to start over, right? Because I feel like, you know, if I'm coming from a high volume board and I go to a mid volume board, I should probably put it in the back again just for baseline, just to get a pure baseline point to start from, and then you can move it forward because every board is different and the volume or the track placement it may be, you know, dramatically different from one board to the next, so very beneficial.
Yeah. when I learned, my first board was a 125 liter Nash Hover.
Yeah.
And it was 7'6".
Yes.
I love that board.
Yep.
It was easy because I'm roughly 72 kilos.
Yeah.
People can learn on smaller boards, but it's way more difficult.
Sure.
And they're going to progress much faster if they start with a bigger board.
Amen.
That board, once I got the mast balanced, it was 3/4 of the way forward because it's a longer board.
Yeah.
Now, about 2 weeks ago, I was testing out the new Rocket S from F1.
Oh, yeah.
A 90 liter board.
Yes.
And
it's a good little board.
I tell you what, it flew right away with the mast all the way back and it was balanced.
Yeah.
If I had tried putting it just a couple of inches forward, just assuming that I knew where it belonged, I would have been bucked hard.
Yeah.
And when you get bucked off, you know, it's not just embarrassing, it's exhausting.
Yep.
Because once you know you're flying off that horse, you're like, how am I going to land?
Right.
So do it slowly, take your time, enjoy the ride.
Yep. Amen.
So you found your sweet spot there. Think about it like a teeter-totter.
Yeah.
And if on a teeter-totter, you can stand like this to balance. That's where you want it. And if you put a heavy child here and a light child here, you actually have to move the board on the fulcrum.
Yeah.
If this is your teeter-totter, you can move it this way or this way, depending on who's heavier.
Sure.
So all the things come into account. How big is your hydrofoil? How much do you weigh? And what are the dimensions of the board?
Yep. And what kind of wind speed? How much power are you getting out of the wing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you have the wind picks up, you're going to have more power. The foil is providing more lift. You might then need to move the mast back a little bit, even if it was balanced at one wind speed. When you get to the top end of the wind range of your wing and your foil, you may have to make some adjustments.
How often? Now you say that because I feel like I'm wondering how often I do that. I'm not experienced enough yet to be in that area. I'm probably I'm about a dozen sessions in. I can ride both directions, but I haven't experimented much with different boards and different wings just yet. I feel like I'm in that mindset of, slow and low and get comfortable with one configuration.
And that's smart.
And then move on, and then you can experiment with, or you can experience the difference between a foil change or a board change or a wing change. So yeah, it is so incremental that the change can come from a mast position change.
Right.
Big
it's
difference.
Huge.
Yep.
I'm teaching your son Connor, and he's a great athlete. But every time he's gone, he's been handed a different board, a different foil, and a different wing, and he has nothing. He has no baseline to move from.
The consistency, yeah.
And I'm like, dude, it's time to get some roof racks and keep with the same board and foil.
Up there. Yes.
So we're working on that.
Yep. Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure. So the moral of this is be patient and be safe.
Yes.
If you rush the process, you're taking a lot of extra risk.
Yes, you are. You really are. And I get it. People, time is limited for all of us. And I feel like, especially, we deal with a lot of type A personalities in wind sports, and a lot of I know what's best. I'll just get out there and figure it out kind of mindsets. And I'm not saying that can't happen. However, the tendency and the trend is that happens. That person runs out there, thinks they know everything. They put the cart before the horse, and they get their butt kicked a little bit. They get their ego put in check, and then
I got my butt kicked.
Yes, and then they come back to the base, the starting blocks, the starting point, and it is humbling, and it is an ego check. But once you get to that, and I think then you have the aha moment, then you have the breakthrough. Now you can start learning.
Yeah.
I feel
in 2019, I called MACkite. I was teaching on the other side of the lake.
Yeah.
And Tucker sold me a 4-meter ozone.
Yeah.
I already had my Nash 2019 hover and foil, and I was an expert windsurfer, I was an expert snowboarder, I was an expert skier, and an expert kiteboarder. I've taught them all for many years.
Yep.
I got it in the mail. I wanted to use it right away.
Which is natural.
Instantly, I unpacked it. I went to the beach. Nobody's there. It's blowing side offshore, 5 to 25. And I put my foil board in the water with my wing, and I got my ass kicked for 45 minutes. I didn't go more than 2 or 3 feet in one direction.
Yeah.
And I was exhausted, and I was humiliated, and I said, okay.
Does that sound familiar?
It was a good lesson for how I'm going to be teaching. So then I spent 3 hours on the beach running perpendicular with the wind.
Yeah.
Getting till everything is instinctive.
Yep.
Then I went on a full-size paddleboard for an hour. I didn't fall once.
Yeah.
I was out and back, full-size paddleboard, left, right, goofy, regular, upwind, downwind. I did that, pumping the sail. When I went back to my foil board, I was foiling it within 2 hours.
Yeah. Cool. Now, did you take a step? I don't want to get too muddled down the road here, but did you take a step to go behind the boat at all?
Oh, yeah.
And you've been kite foiling.
In 2017, I bought the first foil surfboard from Slingshot. It was a Skywalker.
Yeah.
And
I remember that.
First thing I did, of course, was I tried to paddle into breaking waves like a surfer because I thought I was such a great surfer.
Yes.
I got my ass kicked.
Yes.
I drew blood 6 times.
Yes. Yep.
Major, but I got it here, and I got it here, and I got it at the chest, a couple on the leg.
In the surf, that's a different story.
You roll in the waves, you're a frog in the blender. So, I immediately...
I'm not laughing at that.
It is funny, though.
Yes.
So, after I did that, I actually rented a boat.
Yeah.
Paid a guy to drive me around. And after 2 hours, I had
stabilized the hydrofoil.
I wouldn't call it mastered, but I could be stable riding goofy and regular. I could let go of the rope and ride the swell.
Cool.
Ride the wake. But I didn't go back to trying to paddle into waves. And the reason is, this is important, a wave is water molecules rolling in deep water.
Yeah.
But as it comes and starts to touch the bottom coming up shallow, as soon as the water molecules do this, they start spinning 90 degrees. And if you're not ready for that change on your foil, you're going down hard. You're leashed to your wing, you're leashed to your foil board. They can wrap you up like a fly in a spider web. And you're doing it with your Ginsu knife.
Which is why you see most people, I mean, with the exception of experienced and pro level riders, kind of, you know, you're bringing that swell into a point where it's hitting the spot where surfers are going to be picking up the swell.
Once it starts to get steep, you need to kick out. You want to avoid the surfers. They need the sweet spot to take off. Ride bumps. Ride bumps for a really long time.
For sure.
You could ride a double overhead swell in deep water. Because it's still rolling like this. But as soon as it comes and touches the bottom, the rolling flips 90 degrees and now it's doing this.
Different turbulence.
You have drastic current in between the waves. There's a lot going on under the water.
And you can feel it right away as soon as you're in that zone.
You might be an expert surfer, windsurfer, kite surfer, and charging in big waves. You're doing that two-dimensionally on top of the water. When you're inside this rolling thing and your foil is inside here, it's three-dimensional flying rather than two-dimensional flying. Most people have been on an airplane where they say, oh, I'm going to have to turn on the seatbelt side. We're getting a little bit of turbulence. And if you're not on your seatbelt, you're doing this. That's what it's like when you get into the change between water molecules rolling this way and water molecules rolling this way. But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
I'm tracking with you, though. Nope, I'm tracking.
So, let's talk a little bit more about the pumping. Everybody's familiar with you're pumping your wing here, and then you're pumping your wing here like a skateboarder in a transition. But there's a third axis that almost nobody is really aware about, except for windsurfers.
Is this going to be a third segment? I should
probably.
Okay. So we've talked about mast positioning. Okay, cool. So let's do a wrap on that with mast position. Do you have any further thoughts about that before we wrap that? Is there anything else you want to add to that
mast position is very easy if you start in the back, and it's very hard if you try to start in the middle.
Amen.
Be patient, be safe.
That's a good summarization. Guys, if you have any further questions about the position of your hydrofoil mast and where that needs to be on your board, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're always happy to help. And until next time, this is Eric, I'm Aaron, and we look forward to seeing you guys on the water.